Good evening. My name is Michael Watkins. I'm chair of the Advisory Redistricting Committee. I represent Zach Friend in the 2nd District. Welcome to the special meeting and public workshop on redistricting. I'd ask staff now to take roll call.
Commissioner O'Neill. Commissioner Watkins.
Here.
Commissioner Raden.
Here.
Commissioner Reyes is absent, and Commissioner Mosher.
Here.
You have a quorum with Commissioner Reyes excused.
Okay, well, thank you. Welcome introductions. I'd like the staff now and the committee to introduce themselves and any comments say, this is our 3rd or 4th public workshop. And so I'd like the commission to introduce themselves and any comments they may have for the public. Let's start with Commissioner Raden.
Yes, I'm Peter Raden. I am a resident of Watsonville and representing the 4th District, Supervisor Rapid. And I'm very happy to be involved with the process of redistricting this time around, and look forward to working with everyone. Continuing to work with everyone.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Neill.
Hi, I'm Sherry O'Neill. I'm a resident of Live Oak. I represent the 1st District, which is Supervisor Van Koenig, and I'm happy to be here. This is fun.
Commissioner Mosher, I think this is your area, right?
Yes, I'm a resident of Felton. I represent the 5th District, Supervisor McPherson appointed. And as for the others, very pleased to be here working on this important endeavor and appreciate all the staff support we're getting.
Well, thank you all for being here. No, Commissioner. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just a welcome to
Just welcome to Felton.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Reyes cannot be here tonight, so we'll move on to staff presentations. Alyssa or Rita, you want to take that on? Or Matt?
So I think really quickly, we'll introduce staff if you don't mind.
That'd be
Sure.
fine. Go ahead, Alyssa.
With the CAO's office, and I'm going to pass it over to Ruby.
Hi, I'm Ruby Marquez, and I'm the Chief Assistant County Counsel. I'm the legal advisor to the commission.
Pass it to Rita.
Hi, Rita Sanchez. I'm with the County Administrative Office and part of the redistricting team.
How about Matt?
Hello, I'm Matt Price. I'm with the County GIS.
And I'm Jenny Gomez. I'm also with County GIS. And I'm Susan Perlman, part of the County Administrative Office's redistricting team. I'm Gina Lefdoli, and I'm in elections.
All right, I think we've got everyone. Now we are ready for staff presentations, Mr. Chair. Rita.
Okay, room number 3A, please.
Okay, so I will share my screen. Okay, so thanks everyone for attending today's public workshop. Again, my name is Rita Sanchez. I'm with the County Administrative Office. And in this presentation, I'm going to go over the basics of redistricting, a little bit on the role of the Advisory Commission. I'll mention the laws governing redistricting. And then after that, background information. I'll talk a little bit about communities of interest and give a bit of a timeline for the rest of the redistricting process. So the purpose of these public workshops is to inform the public on current redistricting efforts and to gain public input. We have one more public workshop scheduled after this one. It'll be in South County in Watsonville, and you're welcome to attend. And also, please, if you could help us get the word out, we'd really appreciate it. So what is redistricting and why does it matter? Redistricting usually happens every 10 years after the release of the decennial census. The census provides a lot of information on who the community is and how it's changed in the past 10 years. As communities change, existing districts need to be adjusted so that each district is substantially equal in population and to ensure that each board member represents about the same number of constituents. Your participation today in the redistricting process matters because it helps determine which neighborhoods and communities are grouped together into a district for purposes of electing a board member. It also ensures that more communities have a better opportunity to elect candidates of their choice and voice their specific needs and interests. So the county is made up of 5 supervisorial districts, each with an elected representative, making up our Board of Supervisors. And on February 23rd of this year, the Board of Supervisors established the Advisory Redistricting Commission to guide redistricting efforts, and soon after appointed a community member whom you've met of each district to serve on the commission. The role of the commission is to conduct public outreach through informational sessions and workshops like today's to encourage public participation. The commission serves as the eyes and ears of the supervisors to hear public input from the community to help identify and define our neighborhoods and communities of interest in Santa Cruz County. Ultimately, they will recommend changes in district boundaries to be considered by the board in its approval of updated supervisorial boundaries. And by participating today, you are providing commissioners with the input necessary for them to consider when they begin drafting their recommended changes. Along with your input, commissioners will need to take certain state and federal legislature into consideration as they do their redistricting work. Under Assembly Bill 849 and Election Code 21500, supervisorial districts must be drawn under the following order of priority. The first is supervisorial districts must be of nearly equal population, meaning there is some deviation as acceptable. The districts must comply with the Voting Rights Act to ensure that minorities have a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. Third on the list is, to the extent possible, supervisorial lines must be drawn contiguously, which means they share a common border. Next, supervisorial districts must minimize the division of cities, neighborhoods, or communities of interest to the extent possible. And we will come back to communities of interest in the next slide and more as we move along the agenda. Districts must minimize division of cities or census designated places. Boundaries must be easily identifiable and understandable. This can be achieved by utilizing natural and artificial barriers, streets, or county boundary lines. Districts must be geographically compact to the extent possible. And last on the list, to the extent possible, districts must not favor or discriminate against any political party. So this set of criteria makes up the marching orders for the commission members as they move through their work. Now, communities of interest. So now that you've received a bit of background information, we'll move over to communities of interest. And as you saw in the previous slide, communities of interest is ranked fairly high in the priority list of things to consider as commissioners draw district lines. We do have a definition for communities of interest. They are defined as a concentrated population which shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. Some examples include areas in which people share similar living standards, have similar cultures, use the same transportation facilities, have similar work opportunities, or have access to the same media. It can also be a group of people with a common cause or path. And though we do have a legal definition for a community of interest, it is up to those who live or work in the community to identify and establish the interest that unites it. So as you start thinking about your community of interest, it is possible that people can belong to multiple communities of interest. Something to think about is what brings you together and is important to your community. Start by thinking about your street, your neighborhood. What are the boundaries of your community of interest? Where does your community start and end? And what issues do you and your neighbors care about? And how does influencing the maps help your cause. A little later tonight, you'll have an opportunity to tell us about your community of interest. But before we do that, this is my last slide, and we'll just talk a little bit about our timeline, what we're doing and what to expect next. So we began our redistricting process with an access and outreach phase around July with the launch of our website. And on our website, we put up community of interest tools to complete forms, gather information for the public to map their community of interest. And we've been engaged in public outreach efforts through social media, reaching out to community organizations, things like that. Currently, we're in the involvement and engagement phase, which consists of public education and community of interest workshops. Though our last public workshop is tomorrow, the community can continue to participate by completing community of interest forms and maps online. Additionally, we will have a mapping tool available soon in the next couple of weeks or so for the public to use to actually draw and submit district maps themselves. And you'll hear more about this tool and the 2020 census data in the next presentation. The mapping tool that I just mentioned will also be available for the commission members who will be working on drafting maps and plans now that the official 2020 census data has been released. And the Board of Supervisors will consider these draft plans and maps and receive public testimony at public hearings, which we have scheduled for October 26th and November 9th. And a final public hearing is scheduled for November 16th with the objective of having the board adopt a final map. The legal deadline for final map adoption is December 15th. So that was a very quick run through of redistricting and what we've been doing so far. We do want to kind of encourage you to get involved, just like you're getting involved in this redistricting efforts. There are other efforts going on throughout the state, throughout the county, and we appreciate your input today. So we will be taking public comment at the end of every agenda item. You will be able to use your raise hand feature. So before we do that, we'll go on to our next staff report. So just a reminder to folks that are attending online to use your raise hand feature when we do get to that portion of getting public comment. And I'll hand it over to Matt.
Great, thank you, Rita. Are you able to see my screen okay?
Not yet, man.
No.
Well, we don't see the presentation yet, Matt.
It's not in presentation mode? Okay, hold on one second, please. Okay, how about now?
There we go.
Awesome. Okay, great, thank you. I'll be covering item 3B, going over some of the redistricting software. My name is Matt Price, and I wanted to thank everybody for coming out and taking the time to support the Advisory Redistricting Commission tonight. What I'm going to be covering is I'm going to be going over the community of interest form and the way that you can submit a map along with that form. I'm going to talk a little bit about the census data that is being provided for the redistricting process. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the Esri redistricting software that we're going to be making available hopefully by Monday. We're going to be working to get the final data loaded in on Friday and hopefully can make that available to the public by Monday. And then I'll also be going over links to some resources that we're providing. So on the county's website, on the redistricting website, you can access the community of interest form. And on this form, we're asking you to provide your name, your address, your phone number, and your email. None of that will be shared. Along with that, we're asking that you provide a name for your community of interest. And then we have 3 different ways that you can provide information about your community of interest. So you can tell us about your community of interest. You know, why is there shared interest in your location? What brings the group together? You can tell us about the place. You know, are there nearby areas that maybe you don't want to be included with in the same district? and then an option just to provide a little bit more about the story behind your community of interest. And then when you get to the end of the form, you'll have the option to submit a map. And when you get to the bottom, you can draw your community of interest actually in the form on the map. And so if I can take your attention to the upper left-hand portion of the screen, you'll see that you can type in an address or a place and it'll zoom the map to that location. You have the standard kind of zoom in and out tools to kind of adjust the scale of the map. There is a home button that will reset the view to the entire county. And then there's a really handy tool, which is the little square box below the home button. And that will kind of pop the map out of the form and give you a little bit more area, a little more real estate to work with the tools. Then on the upper right-hand side, there is a base map selector. So you can switch between different base maps if you want to see the imagery behind it. And then there's the Start Drawing button. And once you click on the Start Drawing button and you click on the map, you'll notice that a dot will appear. And then as your mouse moves, you can kind of go around and click and actually draw your community of interest. Once you click that first time, there'll be a little dialogue that'll show up and it'll allow you to undo or redo or reset or cancel, or then finally finish after you've drawn your community of interest. So you can double click or you can click the finish tool. Once you click the finish tool, you'll notice that there'll be a little pencil that will show up on the toolbar in the upper right. And if you click on that pencil, if you want to, you can make adjustments. If you're not completely happy or satisfied with the community of interest that you've drawn, you can make adjustments. And then once you're happy, you can hit the checkbox or the submit or double click out and that'll clear it. And then at that point, you can submit your survey. And once the survey is submitted, we review it for appropriate language, and then we feed it into this app, which is our community of interest app, which is also available on the county's redistricting website. As I said, we don't share your name or contact information. We do provide the name that you provided your community of interest, and then the other three descriptive text areas we are also included on the map. So the census data that we're going to be using for the redistricting process, the census geography is kind of this idea of containment. So the nation is broken into states that are broken into counties that are broken into census tracts and block groups, and then finally census blocks. And the census blocks are the smallest unit, and this will be the unit that we'll be using to transfer the population between the districts. And so you can get an example of what these blocks look like on the right-hand side. You can see that we have each block has a unique identifying number. And then on this particular map, we have the population that has been counted within that block below the number. So the census blocks are kind of the basic building blocks that we're going to be using to transfer the population between the districts. So the data that, in addition to just the total population, the 2020 census provides us with what's referred to as the Public Law 94-171 summary files. And these files contain information about race. They include information about Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino by race, race for 18 years and over, Hispanic or Latino, not Hispanic or Latino by race for 18 years and over, group quarter population by type, housing occupancy status. And then we also use other information as part of the redistricting process, one of those being the community of interest. And so that's why we've kind of brought people here tonight to share your community of interest, to provide input into this process. We will also be making other jurisdictional boundaries available. So the city boundaries, the census designated places, certain special districts like fire and water. The statewide database also provides other information. They provide the voter registration information and the statement of vote, and those have been tied back to the 2020 census blocks as well. They also provide the citizen voting age population on the 2020 census block geography as well. So we're going to be providing the Esri redistricting software solution. And this is a web-based software, and it will enable the Redistricting Commission and citizens to complete and share their regulation compliant redistricting plans. And the software, it runs in any browser, And it basically supports plan creation, reporting, and thematic mapping. And so for the plan creation, it basically, there's a step-by-step process that takes you through the workflow of assigning blocks to the different supervisorial districts, or basically moving one block to another district. The reporting tools allow you to generate reports after you've maybe possibly developed a plan and reconfigured some of the existing supervisorial district blocks. And so you can get reports that will give you breakouts by race and other variables that matter to your organization or the constituents. And the tool also provides for output of thematic maps. And so it's a very helpful way for you to kind of print and potentially share and better communicate the plans that you've developed. And so here's an example of just kind of like what the software looks like. So this is our existing supervisorial district configuration. And so as you move the block from one district to another, basically transfer the block from one district to another, on the fly, the software will recalculate the totals and the percentages. So you can kind of see in District 1, it gives you the total Hispanic population, and it also gives you the total Hispanic population by percent. So as you're going through and developing these plans, you can see how the changes that you're making to the map affect the underlying demographics. And then here's some links that I wanted to provide. This is the first one is a link to the community of interest form that I went through earlier. There's also, if you're interested about the data that's provided from the statewide database, I provided the statewide database website. And then there's links to the Esri redistricting solution. The first link is the webpage where we're going to be making the application available, the Esri redistricting software solution tool available on the county's redistricting webpage. The following link is a link that gives you an overview of that software. And then there are links to YouTube videos. There's several, I think there's around 30 of these videos. They're very short. They kind of take you through a step in the process. So really, I think hopefully those videos will help people as they move through and work through the process of developing plans in the software. And then I wanted to turn it over to Jenny for agenda item 3C.
Thank you, Matt. So for agenda item 3C, I want to talk a little bit more about the statewide database data that we received. This data was originally, we received it last Wednesday, and we actually received kind of a slight adjustment to it yesterday. So I want to make the commissioners and staff just double check with them that the data has changed very slightly. So our adjusted population total was 271,353, and now it's 352. So somebody wandered off onto a different spreadsheet, I guess. Something like that. And so the other totals, you know, they're very, very slightly different. I just want to make you aware. We have recalculated everything, redone the maps. So you might still have old prints of stuff that look, you know, just slightly different. So this is why, because we got a new release, adjusted release of that data yesterday. Hopefully that won't happen again. So, as I said, the population, 271,352, our target population is basically that number divided by 5 because we have 5 districts. So our target population is about 54,270. And so you can see the over under, you know, the percentages and the numbers didn't really change a whole lot. But our biggest difference in population is about a 2,100 person difference between districts 3 and 5. So this adjusted revised data, we're hoping is going to be loaded. It's going to be loaded into the software on Friday, so that when the software does become available, it will be this data and not last week's data. And that's about it.
So,
Is that in the staff presentation for now?
yes,
That's the end of the, unless there are questions, yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And right now I think it's our time for commissioner discussion of the data. There was some discussion at the workshop last week, but I don't know if there's any more. You guys don't have to do a replay of what you said last week. Just want to let you know that. But yeah, that's the other piece of this agenda item.
Right. Well, let's open up to the commissioners. Commissioner O'Neill, any comments?
No, I see there's one, yeah, just one person behind that changed. Okay, no, I'm good.
Commissioner Raden?
I have really nothing to add to my comments last week.
What were your comments last week?
We were asked about our impressions of how things changed and how we regarded those. And I mentioned that my impressions, my takeaways from the numbers was that we had broken the pattern that had existed for a number of redistricting cycles. Previously, the 4th district geographically had always become more and more dense. And so it was picking up a higher concentration of the county's population vis-a-vis the other districts. That broken in 2020, and in fact, we have slight undercount. And so there will be an effort presumably to add another 400 or so residents into the 4th district. So ending the geography of 4th district, which again, the first time in a long while. And I wasn't personally surprised about that, but because I'd seen, some signs that the population growth had sort of plateaued. And so I think that hopefully recaps what I said last week and does continue to represent my impressions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Raden. Commissioner Moser?
I have nothing to add from what I said last
Okay.
time.
Before I open to the public, I want to ask staff to comment on their just assumptions on District 3 and District 5. If you like. If you don't like, that's fine too. What the increase and decrease in those districts? Was it housing or was it demographics? Any thoughts on those?
I don't have any specific thoughts on it. I mean, I think there's lots of questions just about people moving in and out. I mean, there's some question around, we had a question last week actually around undercount of students. And I think what we've learned a little bit more about how this, exceptional census process went on during the initial months of the stay-at-home orders. And I can share. I had a little bit of discussion with our census team, and it was really interesting to learn that UCSC worked very closely with the Census Bureau, and was able to, while preserving privacy under, gosh, it's not FERPA, that's the right one, thank you, under FERPA, they did some major data sharing around on-campus students. So, on the date of the, what do they call it? The quartering, the group quarter count. So they had a very clear estimate of who had been on campus on that day. So really, to the extent that there was a question about an undercount potentially, it's not going to be based on students on campus, which were technically not there when they would have done a quartering count, that data was captured. So then the question would be about students who are off campus. And some of at least the anecdotal conversation was lots of those folks were in leases through June. So whether they actually decided to leave or not, that we don't know that there was a lot of loss from that perspective. Now, the other thing that came up, and this was very anecdotal and a sample size of my family, is if there are students, because you're supposed to be counted in the place you're in school, who did come home, that may have worked in, in multiple communities. If my kids who were in school outside of Santa Cruz, and they didn't get counted in their college community, they got counted here. So we're probably, there's some aspect where some of this may have balanced out. So that was just a little bit of some follow-up conversation that came out of some of the questions that arose last week.
So in terms of the what we have now, how many more residents we have now than 10 years ago? In other words, is the spread now where District 5 is a little low and District 3 is a little high? Is that a result of fewer people moving into 5? And it's not necessarily people left and went to 3, but rather the population increase happened more or less equally across the 5 districts, but fewer moved into 5 than into 3. Is that, do we have the? I'd be interested in seeing it.
Okay, yeah, look, I would have to talk with Matt and the GIS team about looking more closely at the census data. I'm looking over to see if Susan has any.
I have the count from 2011, and the count at the time was 262,382. So we're at 272 something now. So it's about 10,000 people fewer in 2011, but the distribution was more skewed. So when the committee who was working on this project in 2011 approached their task, the largest deviation from the 1/5 was 12.3%, and the smallest was 3.7. And Peter's right; it was right in the 4th district. That was the big change, and that had also been seen in the 2001 process as well. So it really even the growth happened during that period of time and slowed once those units were built and occupied. If that's helpful.
Right, and a very good point also. I mean, you're talking about people moving in and moving out. There's other factors, including the development of housing. So you might have had a field there 20 years ago. Now you've got dense housing, and of course that's going to affect it. Likewise, the birth rate's going to affect it, and it's going to be affected also by the death rate, and things like that. And I do think that, go back to anecdotally, I think that people believe that the vagaries of 2020 might have depressed the count in the 4th district. And I suppose that's, it's open to debate, but for our purposes, the here and now, and the reality is that we can't really second guess these census figures. We have to accept them at face value and work with them. And so.
Susan, in 2011, how much deviation how big was the deviation when they finalized it? Was it it was below 5%, I assume?
Yes, indeed.
Was it like, did they really try to get to 0? Or was it, were we in the 3?
Nobody was shooting for 0, but everybody was certainly shooting in the 3 to 5% deviation. And I'd have to check the records to answer that.
Just curious.
Absolutely.
It makes our job a little different since we're all under 4.
Yeah.
So a much different job than 10 years ago.
Although if I could add is that now we have specific legal requirements that we did not have 10 years ago.
Yes, but one of the things I said last time was that the slide that says to the extent possible, we have to reach this, actually the legal language is to the extent practicable. And you weren't here last time, but I did ask the question, what legal guidance do we have for reaching that practicable standard? And the answer is, I'm an attorney, and I believe the answer is we don't have any because it's never been litigated, but it is a pretty loosey-goosey standard. So I think it's a guidance, and I agree with that, but it isn't to the extent possible.
And we make a good faith effort, and the extent practicable is interesting because you could take each of the individual prongs and say, how practicable is it to keep these cities together, right? But you could also face the practicable question as you work within the set of prongs. And so if it's practical to do one of the prongs, then maybe that detracts from ability to do the other, and then they are ranked according to the statute. And so, hopefully that will be some guidance to us as to what to favor and what not to.
Okay, well, I'll now open up to public comment on this item.
So we'll take public comment for folks in person. If anyone wants to speak, please stand. And Elisa, if you could kind of help me guide who wants to speak there. And then for folks joining us online, please use the raise hand feature, and I will call you by your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number. So do we have folks in person who would like to speak on item 3, the staff presentations that were just given?
Yeah, and just to remind everyone, when we actually talk about communities of interest, that's an opportunity to talk about communities of interest. This is more if you have any questions or comments on the staff presentations. So I'm looking around, and I think people are good for now. So Rita, if we have anyone from our public on Zoom.
We have 2 folks on Zoom, but it doesn't look like there are any raised hands.
Okay, seeing none, let's move on to item 4 then, community of interest exercise.
Question.
Go ahead.
Wondering what efforts were made to people that were planning to stay in Santa Cruz but were impacted by the CZU fire during this process, because they got scattered and they planned to come home, but during the census we were evacuated, so we weren't here to answer the questions and we're in crisis. So we were not prioritizing participating in the census. So I'm just wondering what efforts were made to be inclusive with that population of Santa Cruz.
So I'm happy to speak to that. Part of it is when that enumeration happened. And as we all know, the CZU fire, the lightning strikes happened on August 16th, Sunday, August 16th, and we started evacuations on Tuesday, August 18th. Enumerations predominantly happened in advance of that period. So there was a bunch of different kinds of outreach that happened. The biggest thing was, well, there was a bunch of public campaigns, but also then people received links, postcards to go online and fill out the simple short form. So that enumeration actually happened prior to the CZU evacuations.
Yeah, I'm aware, I was here. But that I also know that I didn't participate in the census myself, and I worked for the county because I was busy doing other things, and my job required me to be continuing to do our work in the community. So it's not like we were like sitting at home remote working, right? We were actually serving our people in the community prior to the fire, and the census was happening at the same time. I was out there supporting the work that the census was doing myself, but as a resident here of the San Lorenzo Valley and an employee of the county, I didn't have time to participate in that census prior to this all happening. I got those postcards. I had people knocking at my door, but when they came to knock at my door up on the mountain, I wasn't home yet, right? So I'm just so that's where my question comes from my own personal experience. What kind of inclusiveness did we support our people that were in these crisis situations to make sure that they were included in this, or are they not? Because they got evacuated and they weren't here during all of that. So that's kind of wondering where did we get to capture that, or?
I think that's a good question. I mean, as we look at the numbers in District 5.
Right.
So that is a question, whether that's partially where we see a big under.
Right. And traditionally, the mountain people are a little bit shy of participating in stuff like this already. So they take a little bit more effort to engage, right? So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Sure.
So, but let's ask ourselves, so suppose we go down that track, what can this commission and ultimately the board of supervisors really do to address the concern? I mean, it seems that we're locked in with these numbers and the process is over, the curtains come down on the census, and it's allowing the commissions and boards of supervisors to second guess the census. The census is not really practical. You have a little bit of leeway in terms of deviations within a range, but other than that, is there anything that can be done to address that concern?
No, as we talked about last week, the numbers are the numbers from the Census Bureau, and that's the data we have to work with. It's within your discretion, as we've talked about, to be within 5%. So if you chose to make some different line adjustments, that's within your prerogative to recommend to the board. And as you said, I mean, we could go down the path of exploring, well, what does that mean if there was an undercount in this district? So that might, I'll just play it out. That might mean, well, if we assume that really there's more people here, then the actual undercount would be lower, and there would be even less reason to change the lines.
But you'd still be constrained by the 5%.
Yes.
And even then, if you pushed it and you articulated that as a reason, you might be subject to criticism. Because I think that the leeway and the give in the 5% isn't intended to allow the commission or the board of supervisors to override what the census numbers were. There should be other considerations, I assume, and I would look to our council for clarification of that. But that just seems to be the right approach. Is that if we are to work within that 5%, it shouldn't be for reasons like this necessarily.
Well, I think you have your ranked criteria, and you guys all need to think about how that plays out. I do want to say, Chair Watkins, we have 2 hands up, a member of the public and then another staff member. Is that all right for us to expand the conversation a little bit?
Absolutely, move forward.
Hi, everybody. My name is Martinez. I live in Felton, part of the 5th district. I'm genuinely here to learn, listen and learn. This is my first time learning about this process. But as I reflect on the feedback that we just heard, what it makes me think about is if there are folks who live in this San Lorenzo Valley who maybe were underrepresented, and you're thinking about expanding the 5th district, to me, it feels really important that it's expanded to include people who have similar lifestyles and similar experiences. If you look out in like the Bonnie Doon area, you've got similar folks who were impacted by the fire, who have some of the same climate challenges, water challenges. And if they were included, it may better represent folks who maybe weren't here to be counted during the census, as opposed to perhaps expanding into an area that doesn't represent folks who live up here in the valley as well, such as in Santa Cruz, further into Santa Cruz. They have a lot of different issues, important issues, but different than folks who live up here. And then the same thing with Scotts Valley. I mean, I know we're hearing a lot of feedback about including all of Scotts Valley. And also the folks who live in Scotts Valley are a different community, a lovely community, but also a really different community than the folks who live up here and the folks I've gotten to know being a part of the San Lorenzo Valley community. So that would be what I would advocate for, is as you expand, commissioners, to please consider folks who've chosen the lifestyle of living up here in the mountains and maybe all that comes with it. And so I would really advocate for looking more North County, Bonnie Doon, even out to Davenport. Those are also folks who are isolated in some of the same ways. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. We do have a couple of questions from Zoom panelists. We have one. What is the priority to keep cities like Scotts Valley together in one district? I'll give that to Alyssa or Rita.
I'm going to actually pass it over to Susan to talk a little bit about why we are where we are, which we talked about last week, which is we actually have every city has 2 board members representing it at this point in our county.
Well, Santa Cruz has 3.
That's true. Santa Cruz has Actually, let me just think. 1, 2, that's 3. 3.
5, 3, and 1.
There's a little, like, everyone touches each other
Right.
at the Emmeline campus.
Right.
Yeah, so right now, our standard, and that was, I think, as we talked about last week, that was a decision that was made in the 2001 redistricting, Susan? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, it was the way it was in 2001. It was changed in 2000. Oh, I'm sorry. In 2001, I think it was split and then, no, pulled, and then split in 2011.
Okay. So,
And right, and it went back to what it was in 1991. So it was a return to a prior scenario. And then the time was, it was purely on political lines. You could count to 3 if you want 3 votes on the board to represent your issues. Isn't it so much better to have two board members? And so the cities are all split and have more than one supervisor representing them. Whether that will hold this time around is, we'll see what commissioners do. And I just wanted to make that point that it isn't staff that's proposing any changes. These changes are proposed by the commissioners that represent board members, and board members are responsible for voting on the proposals that are brought forward, either by the public or by the commissioner. So we're here to assist, but we're not cooking up anything in the back room.
So help me with the history here.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that in 1991, so that goes back 5 ways, obviously. Scotts Valley was entirely within the 5th district.
No, I believe they were split at that.
Oh, they were split. Yeah. And so when's the last time that any city was in a single district? It's probably been.
I'll get back to
Yeah,
you on
I
that.
was thinking, and sometimes in the past, there might have been a chance to have, for example, Scotts Valley in a single district, but then you would sacrifice the ability to put Felton and Boulder Creek in that same district, and so there's a lot of opposite reaction. So I think there's a feeling in San Lorenzo Valley that the district ought to encompass the San Lorenzo Valley, and then to the extent there needs to be additional territory put in to balance it out, then you go to Scotts Valley. So.
I'm going to ask my colleague, Margaret, you were around for the redistricting. I think I misspoke. Scotts Valley was split in 1991, made whole in 2001. Put in one district. So we'll go back and get that
So you
exact.
do think it was only in the 5th district at some point?
At some point,
Yeah.
yes, in the
And
last
it was
40
still-
years.
And you're still able to have all the San Lorenzo Valley in the 5th district.
And it has always been.
Yeah.
The San Lorenzo Valley, Bonnie Doon, Davenport, all that's included.
Well, some of Bonnie Doon is included.
No, that's in
Oh,
the
Davenport's
third
in the third.
district.
Third. Yeah.
So
What about
So
Watsonville?
is it possible, given the numbers, to maintain the San Lorenzo Valley in the 5th district and take all of Scotts Valley in? May not be mathematically possible.
That's something that we'll be looking at.
Yeah.
So what about Watsonville? That's split. Is that been always split, or?
Well, if you go back that far back in time, when I was in high school, all of Watsonville was in the 4th district. And then you had this phenomenon kick in where the density increased so much in Watsonville that by definition, you had to split the city. And it still is a relatively small slice of the city that's in the
That's what I
second
noticed on the
district.
map.
If you look, I look at the city council districts, I know one of them is pretty much entirely in the 2nd district, and a couple more have pockets that are in the 2nd district.
We have a second district map here, someone.
Yeah.
But the other thing that happened over time is now the 4th district doesn't touch the water. Okay, so if you go as far south as the Monterey County line, that used to be the 4th district, you get past you get to San Andreas Road, and now, and over the last few cycles, it's been only in the 2nd district. And so there's community of interest question, how agricultural should the 4th district be? You know, should you try to have more agricultural
Yeah, that would be, I see
influence
that.
in one of
yeah.
the districts versus having it split between the
See,
two?
we have that kind of, as our public speaker said, that we have Scotts Valley and San Lorenzo Valley are quite different in terms of the kinds of communities. that are. So it's a tricky balance. It sounds like the agriculture versus urban has got a similar.
And then the second district, you know, it has quite a wide swath, right? So it has, I believe, Capitola, a piece of Capitola,
Piece of Capitola.
and then a piece of Watsonville, and then all the beach communities in between and Corralitos.
Chair Watkins, I think you have some more comments and questions from the public in the chat. Do you want to, would you like you or Rita to read those, or?
Go ahead, Rita. I don't see any more. Maybe Rita does. I don't see any more, Alyssa.
No, we don't have any additional comments in the chat, and it doesn't look like anybody else has their hand raised.
So
Okay.
let's move on to item number 4, communities of interest.
Great.
And I'll be very brief. We talked quite a bit about interest tonight. The actual definition is a population which shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for the purposes of its effective and fair representation. So what does that really mean? Common to an urban area, a rural area, an industrial area, or an agricultural area? Or those common to areas which people have similar living standards, transportation facilities, have similar work opportunities, or have access to the same methods of communication relevant to the election process. Cultural communities are also communities of interest. Really, the only thing that isn't a community of interest for the purposes of redistricting are relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. So you can see that a community of interest is self-described. You are the one that creates your community of interest, and your stories are powerful. Does your neighborhood share certain celebrations or traditions? Are there important places where your community gathers? What is the history of how your community came together? These personal stories are so important to the work that the commissioners and the board do in redistricting. So I encourage you, in addition to talking a little bit tonight about your personal story, that you go to the redistricting website. It has a great deal of information, and you'll click on the community and you'll find the form and the mapping tool that Matt described in his presentation. And if you don't want to make a map, it doesn't matter. We'll make the map for you. Just describe your community and make sure that you put boundaries like streets or that church over there, or some way so that we can help determine how to map it. So if you don't want to map it, don't think that you can't participate. We want to hear your story. So if you'd like tonight, I thought maybe we could do a little sharing of stories. So please don't hesitate. If you're on Zoom, raise your hand. If you're in the room, please speak up and tell us. You started the conversation about how unique this San Lorenzo Valley is. And I'd certainly love to hear more about that. So please.
Hi, my name is Michelle Moser, and I want to really echo what Monica said. I've lived here since 1974, with about 6 years out in Berkeley in the 80s. And I feel like I know the Valley really well. I've worked with every one of our supervisorial representatives. I've done grassroots organizing for Friends of Locally Owned Water, and a major capital campaign for this library. And I really feel that somebody used the term mountain people. Well, Scotts Valley people, we don't really consider mountain people. We consider our Body Dune neighbors, right, as the people that share a lot of our environmental concerns, a lot of our social concerns, a lot of our problems. And I mean, look at right now, who got burned out, right? So I know that would be a super radical redistricting to include Body Dune with the San Lorenzo Valley. But in my experience, our values and our problems are so similar, and our values and problems are different from Scotts Valley. And I'm Jim Mosier's wife, but he didn't know I wasn't going to speak tonight. We haven't discussed this actually.
Thank you so much. Monica?
Yeah, and also her hand is raised here. Would you like to go first?
It's okay, you go first and I'll go after you.
Okay. Hi again, Monica Martinez again. As a newcomer to the process, like I really, when I looked online, I saw the community of interest form and I really thought that was for communities that were split to like advocate why they should be put back together. It didn't even occur to me that through this process, it could actually split the San Lorenzo Valley. That is a really important piece of information, I think, for our community to know, to weigh in on this process, because as I'll share, this is so much of a community. I've lived here for 10 years. Now I'm raising kids who go to the school district. You know, their friends are folks who have lost homes during the CZU fire. You know, we all struggle with, and also partner together with the same transportation challenges, you know, environmental concerns, and recreation and fun. You know, we really enjoy the beautiful environment that's up here in the San Lorenzo Valley, and have built a community around that, you know, when I relocated to this area to take a job in Santa Cruz, and now I currently have a job that, you know, works throughout the entire Santa Cruz County. And so I really imagined myself as a very regional Santa Cruz resident, you know, friends all around the county. But having a family in the valley has really solidified my just passion for this community, and the friends and the people we spend time with and where we shop and where everything is all connected now to this community. So it feels incredibly important, number one, to like leave the San Lorenzo Valley intact as a part of a single. Also, as if you look at expanding to include our neighbors who are struggling with some of the same challenges in the mountains. Was that time?
No.
To the time cut off. And communities, like I said, who are a little bit more isolated. You know, that's why I look out even to Davenport, because some this and environmental concerns in some regards. So, you know, I'm just somebody who really loves living here, but also recognize that there's a lot of challenges and gaps and need for strong representation. And so it really feels important that this community is kept together.
Thank you, Monica. And you have 4 commissioners here, so I think we're listening to your comments. Any other comments on item number 4?
Yeah, we had another speaker, and actually I was to ask Monica a question, and actually Michelle as well. I mean, where would you see the natural cutoff? Well, I mean, maybe, and is it the city limits of Scotts Valley? What would you guys see as when you describe what I'm seeing as the mountain to rural coast community, those natural boundaries?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think of a Long Graham Hill, you know, as far as that direction. I think, for example, you know, my wife works at the juvenile hall, right? And that's very much Felton and feels very much a part of Felton. Whereas Scotts Valley, I mean, Michelle, a couple things that we don't have, but you know, it is definitely, you know, what happens in their school district is very different than what happens in the SLV USC. And yeah, so it's just, it is a radical idea, but it might be something worth considering. On the north side, you know, I know that part of Bonnie Doon is included, but we've got the whole Pine Flat area that's in the 3rd district. I think in some ways it's gonna become a numbers game as far as like what would be brought in that would help make the numbers. I don't feel like this area represents UCSC, and I know that's like right up in there, but it doesn't feel like it's. I think that some representation issues might get a little like mixed up because UCSC has such a important relationship with the city of Santa Cruz. So I don't think that would be brought in as far as representing the same lifestyle or.
And if you guys want to draw, you can also do that.
and blue things, right there. And you don't have to do it right now, you can go online and do it, so whatever you like. And when you go online, when we have the mapping software, you'll be able to see population numbers in census tracts. And you really can get a sense of, oh, well, if we got rid of those people over there, well, we could grab these.
I mean, there's a couple of them, but.
I didn't point there, I just said those people. Yeah, so.
And I think in terms of our Supervisor McPherson is really representing this valley, and Supervisor Coonerty has got a really urban area to represent as well as a really rural area. So I think having one supervisor for this very rural mountain areas really would make sense. And we only have one. I mean, that's something that's really a challenge here when you're trying to accomplish things politically. There's one governmental representative in our district. We have no cities here.
Well, just a time to someone else.
Well, I just wanted to see if we could.
Yes.
So my name is Helen, I go by Elena as well, and I'm new to San Lorenzo Valley. And I've been here for 8 years in Santa Cruz. I've been in San Lorenzo Valley, I live in Brookdale. And did I mention I'm a single parent to a 16-year-old? So when I moved here, I have because I'm going back to the question about community, who our community is for me. I had no support network here, no family, and a young child. So I landed in unincorporated Santa Cruz, renting a room in Paso Tiempo so that I could get us a place later. But to get me here in Santa Cruz, I had to rent a bedroom with my daughter. And I had no support to help me with a very busy schedule, sometimes 10, 12-hour days when we got busy at work. So thankfully, my employer allowed me to bring my daughter with me. But my networks of support and programs that were available to me in the community, which ended up not being so much here in the valley, but in Santa Cruz. And as supports became more available, like the first thing that I did was Boys and Girls Club. And luckily I was able to get her signed up with Big Brothers Big Sisters. So her big sister helped me with my long nights twice a week. That's what got me through my beginning work here in Santa Cruz and having a new job. And Boys and Girls Club helped me with directly after school. But those were not available up here. Those were supports in the city. Until we moved Boys and Girls Club to Scotts Valley, that's still the closest. I live in Brookdale. I'm almost in Boulder Creek. So that's my community. I shift between the mountains and Cruz City. And I work countywide, so I'm all up and down the county. Had National Voter Registration Day. Elton to Main Street Library in Watsonville and hit every library that was open all the way back to the mountains that evening. I ended my day here back at the Fountain Library with my team that was closing here. That's common for my work. While I live here, what do we always say? Our home is where our home is, but we often live at work. So my work is in Santa Cruz City. Home is up here in Brookdale. So that's my community. But my home is my home, and I need resources close to me to help give me support. I'm sure I'm not the only person in our community that has similar stories for who our community is, right? But most of us that are employees are not staying here to work. So we experience the same kind of challenges that we have in our home community as a community. And definitely, my daughter goes to school in Scotts Valley only because we started in that school district in 5th grade. And we had moved around a lot, so I wanted to give her some consistency. And we stayed there as I pass through and I go to work. But I see the difference in the resources that are available to us over here. And it kind of, that's what made my decision. Because I don't want my daughter walking on Highway 9 to catch the bus. That's the main reason.
Okay, I want to thank you. We're well over the 3-minute time limit, but I want to thank you for your comments. And I'm sure the board is taking all this into consideration. So thank you so much. Are there any other participants that want to say anything? So let's
see. I don't think we have anyone else here in the library. The question would be, do we have anyone online with Rita?
We don't have anyone with their hand raised to participate on this item.
Let's move on now to item number 5, public comment.
May I just ask a couple of questions first?
Sure, Peter.
Yes, Elena, I understand the Santa Cruz community and the San Lorenzo Valley community and these issues having to do with where your daughter goes to school. But for purposes of a tangible message that we can take into account as we deliberate, how would you like to distill it?
I think my point is that I agree with the other two ladies that our communities, it's important to identify the difference between the types of lifestyle that we experience, right? And the challenges that we experience. Like, while Scotts Valley got evacuated from the CCU fire, most of the people in Scotts Valley got evacuated maybe for a week. But people in Brookdale and Boulder Creek, we were out in Felton for 3. Bonnie Doon and some of the other places,
So
even longer than that. But Scotts Valley didn't experience that type of life situation, right?
Mhm.
So when we're talking about looking at the communities and their similarities and the differences, consider that through the process and the types of resources that are available to us. Because the other, as we were talking about Bonnie Doon, Davenport, that area of Santa Cruz, they definitely experience similar lifestyle scenarios that we do versus Scotts Valley.
So you're echoing the message. that
I'm echoing the
Keep the
message.
San Lorenzo Valley tight,
I
and to the extent that there's any expansion, go to
like similar communities.
What's kind of interesting, just to note, it's a little paradoxical. Because I said, well, it's really great to keep the agricultural areas together, community of interest. And, you have both, or 3 of you have all said, hey, San Lorenzo Valley needs to be tight, which is great. But you also mentioned, Michelle, right? You mentioned you have only a single representative, right? And Susan was describing some of the past considerations where the cities lobbied so that they weren't represented by a single representative, but instead had coverage from 2 supervisors.
Yeah.
And so it's just a little bit paradoxical because on the one hand, the cities were thinking, well, it'd be really great if we can divide this up because we'll have more muscle, right? And I'm hearing you guys say, well, no, actually what we want to do is concentrate with 1 representative among the 5. And that's the more natural conclusion that I would come to. And, again, transporting it to the other example of agriculture, that was sort of my conclusion there too, that perhaps you bulk up the agricultural community in 1 district and not have it divided. So it's an interesting sort of paradox.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
I gave that some thought, honestly, before I suggested my comments. Like, wow, kind of looking at what's happening at the board of supervisors today with like both Supervisor McPherson and Supervisor Coonerty working together to support the CZU victims. Like, wow, it would be probably really tough for Supervisor McPherson to do it by himself. However, then I looked at the whole county and I realized that so much of our county has like burnable land, and actually it's the district that is Supervisor Koenig, 1st district, that has like a ton of space. And so
if the supervisors want to work together to improve fire safety, for example, I think there'll be a lot of support and allies because it's kind of, there is mountainous areas elsewhere, you know?
And it is true, I mean, you have a lot of assistance in terms of getting people zeroed in on the issues of fire, including insurance carriers, you know, statewide resources and
Yeah.
people's self-interest. Master gardeners, you know, they've taken a new approach, where before they weren't at all sensitive to the nature of the plant and whether it was fuel for a fire, and now, you know, it's a big deal, so.
Okay, I'll now move on to item number 6, reports and announcements from staff.
I'm looking around. I don't know. Ruby has an announcement.
We will talk about it more at next week's Redistricting Commission, but the governor did sign AB 361, so we can continue to meet in hybrid and teleconferencing style. So at the next meeting, we'll have some findings for you all to make so that we can continue to meet this way.
And Peter, I will not be there tomorrow. Will you be able to chair the meeting tomorrow, Peter?
Yes, I'm planning to be there.
Okay, thank you so much. Would you chair? Okay, thank you. Yes.
And I don't know how many people are online, but this is the first time I've been to the Felton Branch Library, and it is an extraordinary building. And I would like everybody in that county who's listening in to come up and see it. It's amazing. It's a beautiful work of art and a lovely center for the San Lorenzo community. So my invitation is out. Come see the Felton Branch Library.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'll take you up on that. Hearing no other, go ahead, Alyssa.
Or item, I was remiss in mentioning our IT person who has made this magic work. We got on a wizard. And just thank you, Archer, for being here.
I would ask the commission, I would make a motion for an adjournment.
Yeah.
That one?
Reports and announcements?
No, I think we.
No, we did that. We're on adjournment now. So any motion for adjournment? Okay, thank you. Second?
Could be time, just, I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
Commissioners, as I said last time, I'm concerned about our timeline. We're gonna meet next Wednesday. And I'm just, what would be practical and useful for each of us to bring to that meeting so that we can kind of jumpstart the discussion? I feel like, are we expecting to actually bring maps? And I'm, just for as an example, I'm reluctant to do any mapping of the area in South County because I feel like that I don't know those communities. You know them better than I do, and I'd be interested in getting your input about it, just as I would like to give you my input about what's going on up here. And so I'm just wondering what can we do as commissioners? What would be a good strategy for us to make the discussions next week work well, because we have so little time. And if we just come in kind of cold, I think we're going to have trouble coming up with two practical. Let me just get this clear too. We're supposed to take to the Board of Supervisors 2 proposals. We're supposed to come to consensus as a commission. They've asked for 2. Maybe a main proposal and an alternative. Is that?
I would say actually, if we look at the explicit direction going into this commission, there wasn't a number specified, but 2 has been traditional.
Okay.
Just the last time, there were 2. Only because there was a very little difference of opinion about how to work through the university. But a single proposal
would
sure make it easy for everybody.
And the other,
and we also have to make room for proposals to come from the public.
Okay.
But in terms of your committee,
So we could decide to do more
you
than
could
one.
come to consensus, that would be beautiful.
It still brings me back to the point of what would be helpful, say for you, in what I would bring. I was thinking of writing something down and kind of laying out some principles, looking at the 5th district and our relationship with both we touched 1 and 3, we don't touch.
And so I'm
Yeah,
actually
sure.
the guy probably with the easiest job because I only touch Michael's district.
Right.
Michael, on the other hand, touches other districts besides the 4th, and then all of you. So,
Is there something we could circulate beforehand? I don't know, I'm just throwing this out because I'm worried, as I said last time, I'm just concerned about the timeline and that we're gonna be this real crunch and not have time to really share ideas in a constructive way, given the timeline.
Will we all be
I
trained?
think that from my perspective, I think we would add additional meetings to really dig deeper if we have to. So I wouldn't worry about the timeline. I think we would just try to make ourselves available at certain times to really vet out all the different opinions and ideas and boundaries that we need to do. So we probably need to keep some time over the next month in case that does occur, in my opinion.
Also, I wanted to just respond in a very direct way. Jenny and I are available to go make an appointment, go sit down next to them, and they can work the mapping and work with you. And you go, oh, well, what would happen if I did this? And they can do that for you. And even though we I guess this Friday we're talking about, this week, it's all gonna be loaded into the magic software. And until that time, we have maps that have all the population numbers by census blocks. So please feel free at any point to call Jenny or Matt and say, I'd love to come in and work with you. And that way you'll have a sense of what might be possible when you come together on this.
Okay.
I just also, I know Sherry wanted to say something. I know we also had talked about adding the meeting the following week.
Yes, I have that on my calendar.
So we do have that. I want to also just remind, we are bringing these recommendations to the board on the 26th, as Rita talked about in the overview of the process. We do have some noticing around that. So we will get some follow-up to all of you around process, but if that idea of bringing your ideas, working with staff, being ready to, start putting concepts on the table next week is really the intention.
Okay.
And then you'll have follow-up and you'll
Right.
be able to have those conversations together, work again with Matt and Jenny, and you guys will become experts at the Esri mapping software yourself, I'm quite sure.
That was my point. I think that if everybody takes the time to go through that Esri software, I think that's a critical part of this. And if we all maybe come with some printouts of what we've worked with that. I think I'm probably the only one so far that's gone through the training, but it's definitely something that I think is going to be a useful tool.
Yeah, I'm signed up for Friday.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay, thank you. I think any more questions or comments?
Yeah, Chair, before we adjourn, I did see that we have one member of the public that just joined, and I want to give them if it's okay with you, give them the opportunity to raise their hand using the raise hand feature if they wanted to provide comment. The other thing is another person who's joined us online has asked if it's possible to demonstrate how to draw a community of interest map on the website. I know that we are close to 8 o'clock, and Eric, if you want to email us at redistricting2021@santacruzcounty.us, we'd be more than happy to work with you and teach you how to do that after this meeting.
Okay, so Rita, you said there was one more hand up?
Yes. Would it be okay to?
Sure, go ahead. They got 3 minutes.
Okay.
Hi, Laura Lee Martin. I don't need 3 minutes. Thank you for the work you're doing. I live in the Prospect Heights de la Viega area, and we're sort of an unusual cutout. We're in the district that has mostly the county, unincorporated county. So I'm going to be watching and talking to my neighbors and trying to figure out how to make comment on that and try to figure out why we're different and maybe have a reconsideration as you go forward.
Laura Lee,
Thank you.
What district are you currently in?
I'm in Manu's district right now.
Okay.
And we're just a small neighborhood on the inland side of the freeway between like Branson 40 and the hospital. And there's a little bit other, but we're sort of, they go a little bit further than that, but it's sort of a odd cutout. And it's hard to actually get much attention when the rest of the county's pulling Manu's an interest in the other direction.
What's your recommendation, Laura?
I think that we ought to look more closely at where we draw those lines and start to bring the city into the same supervisory districts and have more like kind of interests. Sorry, my dog's in the background.
All right, well, thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other comments from staff? I think, go ahead.
I move
Listen.
to adjourn.
Okay, there was a second. Do we have a second from Sherry or Peter? Second from Sherry, okay. We'll adjourn this meeting. I want to thank all of you for participating. There's another meeting tomorrow. You can also go in by Zoom, and have a good evening. Thank you so much.